Today we're going to be installing the Add-A-Board retrofit repair kit and new limit switches, into an existing SafeTRAC II curtain machine linear actuator. Tools that will be needed: a flathead or Phillips screwdriver, 1/8 inch Allen wrench, and 7/16 socket and open end wrench. Note that when working with the Add-A-Board, it is a static sensitive device. Make sure that you're properly grounded and you've discharged any static before handling any of the electrical components. First thing we want to do is go and put whatever is controlling the curtain machine into a manual mode or an off mode, so that we can then adjust the location of the load block using the manual switches on the side. The goal that we need to do is make sure that where the load block is contacting the limit switches, we're going to take it off of there, relieve any pressure from the limit switches, so that down here at the limit switch assembly, the collar isn't actually engaging any of them. So using the manual switches, you can move the load block either up or down just to get it off of the load collars. Here you can see we're off the top load collar, and it's a little difficult to see, but we're not touching the bottom load collar anymore. Once the curtain machine is off the limit switches, make sure you follow lockout-tagout procedures to secure power and cut all power before beginning to work inside the enclosure. Now we're going to open up the enclosure box and double check to make sure that the power has been removed from the enclosure before sticking our fingers in there. Looking in the enclosure, at this moment you can see that we still have power showing up in the L1 and L2 lines because the two LEDs are lit. If power is properly secured, we won't see anything in there. You can also use a chirper or a multimeter just to verify for yourself, but if the LEDs aren't lit, then the power's secured. Hopefully we followed proper lockout-tagout procedures so nobody will re-engage the power while we're working. Next, we're going to remove the existing plug-and-play relays. So once the relays are removed, you'll see that it leaves behind the female spade connectors, which will match up to what we see on the Add-A-Board. On the back end, you'll see the male spade version of it. So make sure that you line it up properly to match. It goes on a lot easier if you kind of start with it at an angle. So you can see where the connectors are, and then you can tilt it up into place and gently push it till it's snug and bottoms out against the board. Nothing is going to physically hold it, there aren't any screws, but you can feel that it's in place, it's tight, and making a good connection. Next, after the Add-A-Board has been installed, we need to change out the limit switches for a newer model. So with the 7/16 wrench, there'll be 2 bolts and nuts at the top that hold the weather shield in place. Once that's removed, there'll still be 2 bolts remaining on the back side holding the actual limit switch assembly in place. Once the limit switch assembly is removed, we haven't taken any of the wires off of it yet. You'll see that there's 2 sides to it, the side that faces out from the enclosure and the side that it faced into the enclosure. We'll start with the side that was facing out closest to the boards. Taking off the wires, each of the wires is individually labeled with a number. We're going to make sure that we get the numbers in the right spot when we take the new enclosure or the new limit switch assembly. So starting from the top, and the top has the nutsert nearest the edge of the metal, the bottom nutsert is further away. So starting from the top on the outside, we're going to go number 13 to number 12 to number 11 to number 10. And these can be found on the inside lid of the enclosure. Off to the side here, looking at it, we can see 13, 12, 11, 10 for the side on this side. Once that side is complete, we're going to take the wires off of the old limit switch assembly that were on the side closest to the metal of the enclosure. And again, following the wiring, we're going to just reinstall them onto the new limit switch assembly. So starting at the top, we have number 15, and then there's a jumper wire, number 16, that jumpers over from one limit switch to the other. And then at the bottom, we have number 14. So again, 15, 16, which is a jumper wire, and 14. So once all the wiring is complete, we're going to reinstall the limit switch assembly. So there's a bottom collar here that we're going to loosen up a little bit. with our 1/8" Allen wrench, and then you're going to insert the 2 metal prongs of the limit switch traveler, and then insert the outside 7/16 bolts to hold it in place. Those can be fully tightened at this time. Okay. We're going to tighten up the collar, making sure that the traveling block of the limit switch assembly is not actuating any of the 4 limit switches, so it'll be kind of right in the middle of them. And we'll tighten that down with our 1/8" Allen wrench using the set screw. And you can verify just by physically pressing the switches that none of them are actuated on either side. Then the weather hood gets reinstalled, again using the 7/16 bolts and the kept nuts. And at this point we're ready to carefully reapply power, make sure that there's no arcing, no sparking. Our connections are all well seated, and we can verify the operation of the machine. So this is now an energized box. We have the 2 LEDs for L1 and L2. We don't have any arcing, we don't hear any buzzing. We've got good seated connections both here and at the limit switch assembly. So the final thing we want to do is just verify the operation of the machine. We can start with the manual limit switches. And we're going to run this one all the way down until we contact the lower limit switch stop assembly and verify that the machine does in fact stop when it hits the bottom collar. And we can run it back up and verify that the location of the top stop collar is in the correct place for where we want it to be, and that the machine does in fact stop at the top limit switch assembly as well. So you'll see it'll contact the collar, it'll tug the collar up a little bit, which pulls on the rod, which pulls on the stop collar on the limit switch, contacting the limit switch, and our machine is stopped. So that's it.